Hello, my name is Janine from South Africa, from the lovely Afrikaans ministry at eindlikhoop.com. Please make yourself a lekker cup of coffee or get yourself a glass of juice if you live in a warm place like South Africa, because it's very warm here. And please join me for our coffee chat. I'm going to share with you more about my plans versus the Lord's plans. So make yourself comfortable because you're going to want to listen to this coffee chat because I have more than one testimony to share. I was sitting here and thinking how I always made my own plans. I was living in a place my parents had bought and never thought that I would have to move. But my parents have to sell the place and we decided to move in together. But I have to admit, I did ask the Lord and I asked my friend to also please pray with me that if there's maybe a chance that I can go and live on my own plans. In the meanwhile, my parents and I started to search for a place, and we got a place in an area where I felt I didn't want to move to because I loved the place where I previously lived, but we just couldn't get a place in that area. So we got a place with bedrooms upstairs and a bedroom downstairs. But now I realize that was all part of the Lord's plan. I also prayed that we please move later. I know, all my plans, I asked the Lord if we can maybe first move next year. But we didn't. And that was also part of the Lord's plan. Let me explain. My dad had a stroke last week. So what if we didn't move? My mum would have been all alone with my dad, with no help, because I had to go back to work, my child has to go to school. What if we took the place with the 3 bedrooms upstairs in the area I wanted? My dad wouldn't have been able to climb the stairs now. And yes, I do now realize that the Lord's plans are much more better than mine. So I had to phone my friend last week and ask her to please stop praying that I live on my own, because it was part of the Lord's plan that I live with my parents. But again, how I know my friend, she would have anyway prayed for the Lord's will. My twin sister and I weren't talking, and the moment she heard about my dad's stroke, they drove down to be with my dad. And when we saw each other, we hugged and cried, and immediately there was peace and unity between us. And of course, we could pray together as family next to my dad's hospital bed, precisely like the Lord intended it to be. After the stroke, the doctors did a brain scan, and it showed brain damage on my dad's speech area. But the moment the specialist said that my dad won't be able to speak again, my sister and I said in one voice, "But you don't know our God." And I have to admit, that night when I got into my car, my heart was so sore and I was so tired, and I was thinking of all the what ifs. What if my dad never ever speaks again? What if I never ever hear my dad call me on my nickname he has for me? But immediately my darling Lord asked if I had forgotten that the physio of my son said that he has so much brain damage on his speech area and that he isn't actually supposed to talk a word, but he's talking totally normal. And honestly, I had to answer, "Oh yes, sorry that I had forgotten it right at that moment." The next day, when the specialist came to see my dad, he was amazed that my dad spoke a few words. And if you saw the brain scan with all the damage, you would too know that a miracle was busy unfolding right in front of our eyes. And when my dad was moved from the ICU ward to a normal ward, they couldn't get a bed for him. So he was moved to the oncology ward. But that same day, my French child had an emergency appendix operation. And guess what? Her son was in a ward nearby my dad. So we could encourage each other and share testimonies. Isn't he just the best Lord ever? Oh yes, and we both agreed that we must really stop making our own plans. Oh yes, and when my friend's son's blood pressure was low, she asked me to pray for her son. My mother was next to me. We were in the entrance of the hospital, and I asked my mother quickly to agree with me that her son's blood pressure is going to stabilize. And my mother would usually, in her room, she'd sit always on her bed and pray. There, I saw my mum, and we agreed. I just have to say this. And I said, Mum, we also have to pray. And just there, in the entrance of the hospital, I saw my mum starting to talk to the Lord. That was very special. Another miracle. And it even gets better. I'm just amazed about what the Lord does. Because when I opened the My Beloved devotional for the day, it was Psalm 23, my dad's favorite psalm, that the Lord had all planned out for that specific week. He used the psalm my dad would always say out loud to me as little girl to encourage me. And another testimony that left my jaw wide open was when I asked my darling Lord to please help me to get my dad's banking app in. Because my dad can't do his banking stuff now, I had to go into his banking app and transfer funds like my mum had asked me to do. But my dad couldn't remember his PIN. And I asked my darling to please help me. And when he gave me the numbers and I got in immediately, I was so amazed. I shouted for joy like crazy. My parents probably thought I was crazy, but again, I am crazy for the Lord. My dad was discharged this week, and it even gets better. My dad called me on my nickname, and I know this was part of my darling Lord's plan to pamper me. Isn't he just the best ever? I'm sharing a few promises that I read in Living Lesson 59, Could This Be War? Which I read just before doing this podcast, which I also know my darling orchestrated for me to read at this specific time to remind me of. Do not fear. Stand by and see the salvation of the Lord, which He will accomplish for you today. You need not fight in this battle. Station yourselves. Stand and see the salvation of the Lord on your behalf. Do not fear or be dismayed. The Lord is with you. And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. And I wish I can tell you that everything is perfect now, but it isn't. And if it were to be perfect, would it keep us humble? No, I don't think so. And with the circumstances not being perfect, it keeps us clinging to our big healer. And I know our wonderful big Lord is turning everything around because it brought us, His family, closer. and we as family get to trust the Lord now even more. So I'll be back with more coffee chats to give you more testimonies because I believe and know more testimonies are on the way. Listen to this promise. You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me. Please visit the uiteindelikhoop.com blog for daily encouragement. Until the next time, thank you so much.